We've got breaking news off the coast of Venezuela, everybody. A U.S. ship has intercepted a Russian tanker. The Russian tanker was bringing in products to help Venezuela refine their oil. They need those products in order for their economy to function, and this is a pressure campaign that we have not seen. This level is completely escalating to a point where it's clear that the Trump administration is trying to isolate the Maduro regime. They're basically backing them into a corner, and they're putting them in a position where their resources are going to be extremely diminished. So let's dive right in. Very excited to bring you guys this information. So this is the breaking news. This isn't the actual ship itself. This is the Stockdale, but this is not the actual intercept itself. But it does give you an idea of what they could do and that flex that they would have as they come up next to that Russian tanker. That Russian tanker is going to see those guns, those Sea Whiz guns trained right onto it. Those guns have radars and they look beefy. And then they're going to see that looking right at them. And that is going to give them a little bit of a tingle in places they probably didn't even know they had. So that gives you guys an idea. That's the Stockdale. And again, breaking news of this blockade basically happening, blocking off the Maduro regime from having any hope of keeping that economy going. And I'll be breaking down how this engagement likely went here later in the video, so stay to the end for sure. But this just gives us some clear ideas here of exactly what went down, basically pushing the Russians to a place where now they're not going to be able to deliver these products to Venezuela. And it's a big statement from the U.S. saying, hey, Russia, hey, China, you can't exert as much influence as you once did. You know, daddy's home, and we're not going to let this influence be exerted in our backyard and prop up a regime that's pumping, hundreds of tons of fentanyl into our country every year. But again, that was a Russian tanker, and that Russian tanker makes a run for it. That Russian tanker has to turn, tuck tail, and get out of there because, the USS Stockdale walks in looking strong by the pool, and that Russian tanker is like, yeah, we don't want to mess with this. And so likely what the tanker heard over a secure VHF communication channel was something along the lines of the authority from the Treasury Department to enforce international sanctions of not bringing these products into Venezuela because Venezuela's oil is sanctioned. So it can only be refined in certain ways according to international law. And that's what this Stockdale rolls in and executes, which is, it's the big swing and you-know-what by the pool. But as you can see, this is a pretty cool article here talking about the Seahorse. That's what the Russian vessel is named. And they were en route to Venezuela to deliver that fuel cargo. And the USS Stockdale positioned itself in its path. The Seahorse is under sanctions from the UK, the European Union, and from the US. So this incident, it definitely represents a squeeze that's being put on the Maduro regime. And again, this has happened a couple times. So this tanker has tried to get itself into Venezuela multiple times. And I'm going to show you the ports that it's likely trying to get into as well. But here's an interesting thing that I want to bring up to you guys that no one else is talking about. So they're talking about bringing in only refining materials for the oils, but could there be some weapons? Could there be they got coffee crates, and inside those coffee crates, we've got Shahhed drones, coming from Iran, now smuggled through Russia and then into Venezuela. So a lot of times with things like this, there's like an onion type layer when it comes to the strategies behind getting weapons into these dictator regimes. And a lot of times they disguise them as other products. So could that be something we're not hearing? Yeah, definitely a possibility. But that tanker is continually trying to get into Venezuela to drop off that cargo. It's going back and forth to Cuba as well. And basically, Cuba is kind of where it goes when it has to tuck its tail and run away and go refuel and try to come in again. But again, trying to hide a big tanker as you're coming in when you've got an Aegis combat system equipped Stockdale, which we'll get to here in a second, just not going to be a good day for you as you're walking in and you look like a you-know-what in sweatpants because it's so easy to see you with that Aegis combat system. That Aegis combat system is basically an umbrella over top of any type of strike group, naval asset strike group. So the carrier strike group, the Stockdale is Aegis equipped, and it's basically the conductor of the orchestra that can see everything going on around it for, probably 500 to 1,000 miles, which is just insane. But we're going to talk now about where that ship was likely intercepted and where it was going. And then I'm going to do a full breakdown of what that interception would look like with E-2D Hawkeyes F-18s and how this is going to go down. When it comes to intercepting ships, you fly over the bow in certain regimes because you're basically saying this is not a joke anymore. I've practiced that in the F-15E, flying over the bow of ships, and that's actually a sign of war where you're saying, hey, if you don't turn around right now, you're going to get schwacked. If you fly your fighter jet on the back of the boat, so towards the very aft end, a little bit off, not directly over top of it, it's a sign of I'm trying to identify you. So I'm trying to see what kind of flags you have on your ship. I'm trying to see where you're actually from. I'm getting serial numbers, writing down certain things. But you basically fly over the back of the ship at 50 feet above the ocean, and that's a more legit way to do it. But if you fly over the bow, you fly over the front, right, so that the captain of the ship can see you and basically sees the weapons you're carrying, that's an act of war. So likely these F-18s that were up potentially protecting any type of assets in the area didn't do that, but I'm going to get to why I think E-2D Hawkeyes were probably up there and a part of this whole Aegis thing as well. But here we go. So now you've got what you can see here. You've got the Caribbean, which gives us a great view of the different ports in Venezuela. So when you look at the ports, you can see that they're spotted throughout the country. And again, this is where they're going to keep this thing from going in. And again, they're refining the oil, and they're doing it because Venezuela's crude cannot just be shipped as it is. It has to be refined. It's got more of a sulfuric flair. I was going to say sulfuric taste, but you guys know what I mean. I drink jet fuel, not oil, okay? Not just pure petroleum. Speaking of that, quick coffee break here. But again, I've mapped out the different ports for you here in Venezuela. So let's say the ship gets intercepted, we'll just say, about, say, 100 miles off the coast. So somewhere about here where the interception happens. And again, they're going to tuck tail as soon as they get that VHF call that, hey, the Stockdale has its sea whizzes trained on you, and by the authority of the Treasury Department, you need to turn around and return to your port of departure. That call is going to be something that's going to make those Russian sailors tingle a little bit and say, yeah, we should probably listen. So as it's trucking its way down, it could have been heading for a few different ports. I'll get to the one that I think it was headed for mainly here in a second. But here's some of the oil refining ports that we have. And pretty much all of these have the ability to receive these tankers. And again, it's kind of the main one, though. So here's another one here, Puerto Caballo. And they have integrated a lot of oil refinements into most of these ports. But this one's by Caracas. Caracas is where Maduro, that's where his palace is. That's where he's kind of sitting there hoping that he can just think skinny and no one knows he's there. Please ignore my massive palace made of gold so I can continue doing what I'm doing in Venezuela. But again, here's this main port which has been linked to Iranian arms shipments. So again, I wouldn't be surprised if they brought in that ship here. There's different oil refinement facilities in the area here as well. It's not the main one, but if you kind of zoom in here, we can see this massive port's going to be able to receive pretty much anything they want, and then they can truck things to their different refinement facilities. But again, this port itself, Intel has released that it is definitely responsible for receiving Iranian arms shipments. Surprise, surprise, right? Basically, a few kilometers from Maduro's palace. He's just receiving his AK-47s made of gold. And then if you go down the coast here, this is the second. So that'd be probably I'd say that's probably the second, that Iranian arms shipment port, the port of La Guara. But the port of Guanta, this is probably the main one that I think it was headed for. And I'll tell you why. So we've got this, if you've seen my previous videos, there's a Su-30 base here. So again, their ability to launch fighters and potentially protect any type of shipments coming in. But this port itself, as you can see, it's just got a massive infrastructure for oil refinement. So all these tanks, they continue to flow into Puerto La Cruz, all this different area. So you can see this whole refinement facility, likely where this was headed. But again, intercepted, and these Aegis combat destroyers, they share information. So this carrier strike group in the area, they all know the different routes where these ships are going to try to get to, but this is likely a main one where they're trying to take this product to refine, all the different parts of what needs to be refined in the petroleum to be able to sell it and keep the money flowing to Maduro. And we're going to get to why this is this is potentially, again, when it comes to conflict, guys, you got to think petroleum, oil, and lubricants, POL. And that's some of the main tenets that I learned through all my different military courses, all my leadership courses, all the strategic courses that they would send low and mid-grade officers to. Those are the schools I went to, just low and mid-grade, slightly above average. But basically, it comes down to the strategy, right? And if you want to bleed an enemy of their ability to enact war, or ship fentanyl, or continue to prop up an illegitimate regime, then you basically starve them economically and you starve their war machine first. But it also starves their economy, right? So POL, petroleum, oil, and lubricants, that is starving Maduro's economy, and it's starving his ability to make war and ship fentanyl all over the U.S. But again, those Su-30s that he has to protect the regime, they need petroleum. They need refined jet fuel in order to get airborne. And so if you starve that out, now you're really putting the Maduro regime in a position where, they're kind of that, wolf that's being scared into the corner. You never know what they're going to do, but also they're being bled of resources. So this is a serious deal for Maduro, very serious deal. But again, I thought this article was cool from Army Recognition. They get into more about that Russian flag tanker, the Seahorse, but this here is the Stockdale. This is the USS Stockdale. And it is just doing work. Again, very strong, very capable ship. And it's a strategic move for it to intercept the Seahorse. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. So basically, it's an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer. It just positions itself along the trajectory, and then it sends out that secure VHF. And that basically starts as a counter-narcotic operation. So again, the Stockdale is there for a counter-narcotic operation. That's kind of the main reason, right, that the whole carrier strike group is there. But here's why I think this is totally escalating into a broader maritime campaign that now is on a level that we have never seen before. This pressure on Maduro is something we have never seen before because Washington is enforcing these sanctions by completely showing Russia that they can't exert influence in the region anymore. And basically they're saying, hey, Russia, China, these authoritarian regimes that you've been propping up, now we have options because we've designated them as narco-terrorists. Now we have options to go up against them. So Russia, China, you can't use our own laws against us to keep us from keeping you from influencing these dictators to then harm our country. So it's pretty cool. But basically, this does create operational risk, more operational risk for U.S. naval forces. But this is what they're made for, guys. This is the bread and butter of the U.S. Navy. They are built to go out there and keep any type of nefarious actions from flowing into the U.S. And that's what I think they're doing right now. But it's basically this broader military presence in the Caribbean that's represented through that counter-narcotics. And now it's doing what's called a pressure campaign that's going to try to isolate Venezuela and impede any type of Russia's regional support. And that is the goal, is a pressure campaign. So again, the Stockdale, huge part of the pressure campaign and just a super capable ship. So some more information on that. So it's an Arleigh Burke class. And Arleigh Burke class is just very usable. It's a very diverse ship that can do lots of different missions. But I want to talk to you quickly about just the Aegis combat system. That's an integrated naval weapon systems. It uses computers, it uses radars, directed energy weapons, and it can destroy enemy targets. It can basically track targets, it can fix on them, get the right systems looking at them, it can engage them, or it can pass off those targets to different things. And that's why this Aegis combat system is so vital to this mission in the Caribbean. And when it comes to the system itself, here's a part that people don't typically talk about. But this is the E-2D Advanced Hawkeye. And this is a carrier-based airborne early warning aircraft. So it's like a mini AWACS. If you look at the U.S. Air Force, they've got a huge airborne early warning system, but this one is smaller and, to me, a little more nimble. You can get it into places that massive jet can't really get into, but the E-2D Hawkeye basically slips in, hey, don't mind me. I'm just here doing I'm just looking for the best coffee fields in Venezuela. I'm just looking to see, where the coffee commerce could go best. And that makes me thirsty, obviously. But again, this thing is part of that Aegis combat system. And in my opinion, I think it was pumping in a lot of information to the Stockdale and to any other ships that were a part of this, any other submarines that were a part of this, any recon teams, because they're probably also preparing to board that Seahorse, that Russian tanker, if it doesn't turn around. And that's something you always have to be prepared for. So SEALs that are in the area are prepared to board those ships. Recon Marines prepared to board those ships. Lots of different options. But again, this is the newest variant of the E-2D Hawkeye. And it's a state-of-the-art radar platform that has basically leaps and bounds in capabilities. Like, think of a massive ASA radar up here in this dish that can look 360 degrees at all times. That gives you a capability that really hasn't been seen before, it just makes me a little bit excited if you can't tell. But again, this thing can blast off of a carrier. It can be up there pumping information to the Stockdale. Hey, we see the Seahorse coming in from this direction. It's 120 kilometers out. Here's the course, the trajectory that's going to be on. Here's where you need to position yourself to intercept it. So again, this thing is like the sixth man of the basketball team that makes you win the game every single time. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the ways that basically this intercept went down. Okay, so when you think of the precision and the teamwork that goes into an intercept, especially of a Russian ship, it's a very sensitive thing that you have to do, because again, Russia's ship is something that, it is under sanctions, but also you have to remember that Russia has firepower in the area as well. We don't know the exact integration that they have in Venezuela. We don't know the full integration that they have. But we know that even the potential of Russians flying the Venezuelan Su-30s, they're up there training. They're going to train a lot of the Venezuelan pilots. So there's probably Russian pilots on any given day that if the U.S. went into an air campaign, they'd be fighting against Russian pilots as well. And so the same goes for these ships. Again, we don't know if there's weapons on board. And maybe it's at the point where we know there's weapons on board, but we're just not ready to board them yet, because at the end of the day, we're not ready for this level of conflict. But here's how I think the actual engagement went down. And to me, this is like, man, it's up for debate, but I want to talk to you about what I think happened. Okay, so let's say the Stockdale, it acquires the Seahorse at somewhere around 100 kilometers out, and it starts vectoring towards the vessel. It gives a secure VHF call, and it says, under the Treasury Department's sanctions authority, we are intercepting you, and you must redirect your course. But as a part of that, they're not just going to make that comment. They're going to do some other things too. They're going to go ahead and train their 5-inch gun, which is a massive weapon for, any type of ship does not want to get hit with a 5-inch gun or a Sea Whiz. These things are radar-guided guns, right? They're just incredibly capable weapons. So when you train that, it's basically a psychological type deterrence. And that radar energy could be received by the tanker. They could know they're getting tagged, kind of like, a radar detector on a vehicle. You're going to know when you're getting tagged a lot of the time. So that Phalanx Sea Whiz radar is going to tie on to that Russian oil tanker, and then that radio call is going to come out, okay? And now it's kind of a showdown. Now it's like, okay, who's going to turn around first, and it's a high stakes game of chicken to kind of see what happens. So again, the Seahorse not being a fully armed vessel, and honestly knowing that they have some weapons on board or whatever they have on board, even if it's just what they say it is, those petroleum refinement products to make the Venezuelan petroleum less sulfuric, even if that's just all they have, they know that that's valuable cargo. So boom, instantly the ship's captain's like, hey, this isn't worth risking. Let's just turn around. And we know now that there's some teeth out there in the Caribbean, right? Because of these boat strikes that have been happening, there's actual teeth in the Caribbean. So I would guess here's what happened. So the radio call goes out. They debate with themselves. The Russian sailors debate with themselves for about a minute. Do we do this? Do we, is Mother Russia able to help us continue on our course because we want to deliver our cargo? We want to get paid. But then they know, hey, there's supersonic anti-radiation missiles likely on F-18s, and these E-2D Hawkeyes are up above. We know that there's aircraft in the area. Maybe they've gotten intercepted by an F-18 that flew over the aft part of the ship, and that's just a sign of, hey, we're checking you out. We're here. We've got anti-radiation missiles. We're ready to take you down if we need to, but it's not an active war yet. And so then a minute conversation with those Russian sailors, they probably decided, hey, let's just turn around. Let's live to play another day. And so probably within about 20 minutes or so, they're going to comply and they're going to reverse their course. probably vectoring towards Cuba and then basically go to Cuba, resupply, and then figure things out. But here's why this is strategic context on a whole new level. So this operation obviously targeted Russia's shadow operation in the area, which circumvents sanctions, right? They're trying to get around the sanctions. They're trying to sneak these boats in, and now they know they can't do that. So now Maduro's got basically a $10 billion plus per year annual oil sales revenue coming in. So the U.S. is basically now going to cut off a $10 billion industry for Maduro. So again, does this give other factions in Venezuela the ability to now come in? If Maduro is weakened, does regime change become even more of an option? This is something that we got to think about now. So I'd love to know what you guys think. Does this soft war now even make it even more of a hotbed because Maduro gets desperate? I would love to know what you guys think. Really appreciate you guys being here. If you would, go ahead and say hi on Instagram, say hi on X, and then watch these videos that pop up right here. When these videos pop up and you watch them, it helps the channel grow exponentially, and I would greatly appreciate it. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll keep you updated on all the breaking news coming at you. I'll plan to do a video every single day if I can. Thanks, guys. This is Ryan, also known as Max Afterburner, signing off.